This week we have Eric and Netty presenting on business operations as an LLC. Jeanette Netty Harley owns Harley Land Surveying, is currently in private practice performing land surveying services seamlessly with TrueMark Surveying, based out of Neillsville, Wisconsin. Prior to that, she had diversified experiences in both small and large firms covering private development, municipal utility projects, and state transportation. She graduated from Northeast Wisconsin Technical College with an associate's in applied science and civil engineering technology in 2007 and became licensed in Wisconsin in 2013. Currently serving as the president of Wisconsin's Young Surveyors Network, and she has always been active member of Wisconsin Society of Land Surveyors and received recognition as Wisconsin Young Surveyor of the Year in 2017. Jeanette has 2 boys, resides in Neillsville, Wisconsin, and enjoys the outdoors recreation such as skiing, biking, kayaking, and hunting. And I think you're only going to do the first one tomorrow. Eric Hauge, owner and founder of TrueMark Land Surveying, has been in central Wisconsin specializing in boundary land surveying and development. Eric and Jeanette have a passion for developing relationships with clients to educate them on the full process of a survey and provide a positive outcome regardless of the results. That's not always easy. As a member of the Wisconsin Society of Land Surveyors and a local Western chapter, he participates in outreach communications committees to promote surveying to the public and inspire future surveyors. Eric studied at UW La Crosse and received his professional license in 2007, loves hunting, fishing, and the outdoors, offers a place for family ministry at his property in Willard, where he currently resides. And Eric has 3 grown children. So without further ado, we enjoy you jumping in on this President's Day Monday. And we thank you guys for your time. I'll turn it over.
Thanks for having us.
Of course.
I didn't know you were going to put that nice little bio in there for me. I hope you guys don't mind that we're sharing the screen here. We're going to kind of keep this really informal. I don't know how you normally do.
Nope, this is perfect. Yep.
She said that we had to do it this way in case I said something that wasn't appropriate. She can just reach over and pinch me. So
got it.
That's how this is going to go. So, but thanks for the introduction. I guess I'll thank you for that nice bio. Yeah, I've been licensed since 2007. I went out on my own. I guess it was 2011 is when I started TrueMark Land Surveying. And as you know, as we talk to, we're both involved with mentoring and talking a lot with young people. One of the biggest questions that we get, or I guess one of the biggest comments that we get, is there's a lot of fear, you know, when it comes to someone going out on their own in the surveying profession. And so part of our goal is just to try to help educate some of these young people and just help them walk through the steps of whether it's business ownership or, and you know, whether that's later on in their careers or early on, is really not as scary as most people think, at least not in Wisconsin. I don't know what you guys experience. We're pretty, I guess, easygoing here in Wisconsin as far as, you know, our laws, regulations, and that sort of thing. So I guess we want to touch on a little bit tonight is some of the things that we share with our young people, and that would be, you know, your different options. I think when we get towards the end here, we're going to focus a little bit more on the LLC aspect of business, because that's what Netty and I both have decided, the business model on how to run our business. But essentially, there are 5 different types of business models that are universal throughout at least the United States. You've got your nonprofit organizations, you have a C corporation, you might have an S corporation, you might have a sole proprietorship or an LLC, which is, like I said, is probably where we're going to spend most of our time talking. And I'm hoping that you guys will come up with some questions that hopefully we can answer. I guess I'll throw out a little disclaimer here. We are business owners. We're both licensed and we practice in the state of Wisconsin solely. This is where we own and operate our business as well as live here. We are not attorneys, and we are certainly not tax professionals. So anything that we say, be sure to just check your local state, you know, regulations, laws, you know, tax laws, that sort of thing. So I'll just throw that out there. Don't hold anything that I say as gospel. I don't want you running out there doing something that I tell you to do and get in trouble for it. So I'm just going to throw that out there first. So as I mentioned, there's basically 5 different types of business models that you can, you know, operate under. I guess the first one I mentioned is being nonprofit, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that because it generally doesn't apply to, say, a land surveying firm. This would be maybe a business model that you would start if you were trying to support some kind of a cause or something that's important to you, and you want to protect your personal investment in that business. With a nonprofit, typically you have a board of investors rather than owners, so you have less management options, that sort of thing. There's not a whole lot of flexibility. So you can start and oversee a nonprofit, but you technically don't own it. So I guess for that reason, it really wouldn't apply to, you know, a land surveying type of business. A C corporation is, I guess in my mind, more geared towards a large, I mean, most of the Fortune 500 companies are C-type corporations where you have investors, there's shares that actually get distributed to their shareholders. I guess if you ever plan on going public someday, a C corporation might be a good option for you. But there is a low risk of liability with a C corp, generally because the C corporation is the entity, okay? And you as an owner or a founder or a shareholder are usually not held personally liable for, you know, any errors or mistakes or anything like that that might happen in, you know, within the company. So it reduces your risk. But I was involved, I guess, when I first got started, the company that I worked for, it only had 4 or 5 employees at the time, but for whatever reason, the owner at that time decided that he wanted to go from a individual or a sole proprietorship, and he wanted to become a C corporation with 4 employees. And I don't understand to this day why he did that, because all he did for the next 17 years was complain about the amount of paperwork and filings that you have to do with the state and with the IRS. And there's just all these monthly filings and reports that he had to do. So he literally hired somebody full time just to take care of all of the IRS stuff. So like I said, there's a lot less flexibility with a C corp because you do have to have a board. Basically, you can own the company, but as a group, as a board, you be responsible with how that company runs, the amount of shares that you're going to distribute, what the value of those shares are, that sort of thing. So I guess, you know, from a surveying standpoint, is it good or bad? I don't know. You'd have to weigh out the risk, I guess, of, you know, what all that hassle of the paperwork and the fees and the reporting are versus, you know, either your profits, your income, or that sort of thing. So I guess in my opinion, probably not a good choice for those who are just starting into the surveying profession. But boy, if you can get to the point where you're a C corporation as a land surveyor, go for it. We don't want to get that big, I guess. We like being a small firm. By the way, it is just Jeanette and I. We do not have any employees. In fact, we are not employees of each other either. We both own and operate independently our own LLCs, and we'll get into that too. So if you want to say anything, you just jump in anytime.
I'll get to that.
Oh, I bet you will. So I guess a step down, I'm kind of going in order of, I guess, size-wise of your options as far as business models here. The next one down will be like an S corporation, and an S corp is actually very similar in structure, I guess, to a C corp. I guess in my mind, and from talking to all the tax professionals and attorneys, the C corp versus S corp, and there are some limitations there. I think an S corp is only limited to 100 shareholders versus an unlimited with a C corp, that sort of thing. But most of it has to do with how the taxes are filed and what you can and cannot claim for taxes, and how the taxes are paid. I should mention that with a C corp, a C corp structure is actually taxed, at least in Wisconsin, twice. So you'll pay, your corporation will pay tax on the money that it receives, but then its shareholders also get taxed, or the owners of the company also get taxed. So there's double taxation going on with the C corp. The corporation as an entity pays taxes, and its shareholders or employees, owners, they pay taxes. With an S corp, taxes are only paid once. So the entity itself, the corporation, would not pay its taxes. The people that are drawing the income off of the company will pay their respective shares, you know, of the income tax that's due. So a little bit of a difference there. Again, you know, talk to your tax professional to see if you're considering one of those options.
I guess I'll interject here, because so when I first started, I was an LLC that filed as an S corp, and my tax professional thought there would be this advantage because the corporation itself doesn't pay taxes. I only pay taxes on what I draw out. But my income is so low as a one person, single member LLC that I actually got rid of that designation as an S corp. But that is an option to talk about with your tax professional if you're an LLC on the different filing status.
Mhm. Yeah, and I was when I was looking at how to structure mine, it was the same way. It was, do I do a sole proprietor? Because there are different levels. When we get to LLC, you'll see that there are also different levels under an LLC that you can, as to how you file. So we'll get to that. I'll talk just the last option, and probably what we see at least 75% of the time here in Wisconsin. Most land surveyors are 1 or 2 person operations. There's a licensed land surveyor, you have 1 professional surveyor, and maybe a technician that's working with them, or maybe they'll have a 3rd person that's a drafter, or that sort of thing. But most of them around here, I would say, operate what's called a sole proprietorship. Sole proprietorships are probably popular because they're very easy. There's no paperwork to start one. If you want to come up with a business name, you can. Otherwise, it's Bob the Surveyor, or whatever you want to call it. So it's super easy, and you have total control of exactly what happens in your business from a day-to-day operation. So I think for that reason, and as far as taxes go, a sole proprietorship in Wisconsin here is taxed on your personal income tax. So whatever incomes that you make, you report it right on your 1040 federal income tax form. And there's no extra reportings or filings that go to the state. So it's a very popular option. The downside, of course, you're all aware, would be the liability side of things. With a corporation, whether it's an S Corp, C Corp, you have at least some sort of protection under the umbrella of the entity that you're working under. In a sole proprietorship, it's you, Bob the Surveyor, and heaven forbid, if something would happen, you make a mistake or you cause damage on somebody's property, your personal insurance would be, I guess how I could say it is, they could come after you personally to be liable for any of those damages. So it's a lot more flexible in terms of, I guess, the day-to-day operations, how you run your business, how much you want to pay yourself, how much you want to charge when you work. But along with that comes a little bit higher or much higher risk, if something, would ever happen. So now we'll dig into the last one, which we probably have the most knowledge and experience with, and that would be an LLC. So hopefully, and if you guys have any questions, just feel free to jump in here at any time. We're certainly here to answer any questions. We're not going to talk all night, and it makes our job a lot easier if you guys participate. So hopefully you'll jump in and help us out with that. So an LLC, and again, these are going to be a little bit state specific. But if you want the most flexibility of how you run your business and manage your business, but you still want that moderate level of protection, then maybe an LLC is something that you want to consider. As I mentioned, the business model that Jeanette and I have both decided to go with is an LLC. So I guess we're going to just kind of dive into a little bit the pros and cons of what an LLC has to offer, and maybe why we chose that business model for ourselves. And like I say, while the overall LLC business model can be somewhat generally structured globally, they can vary from state to state. So just be sure that you check with, your local attorney or tax professional just to see what those specific, at least tax filing requirements are. So you want to jump in here, and any questions so far? Are you taking questions as we go?
Yeah, anybody can definitely unmute themselves if anybody's got a quick question they want to ask. Nothing.
All right. LLCs, by the way, can't go public. They have to remain a private entity. So I guess we do get the question once in a while too, is as you go, can you change your business model? And the answer is absolutely. So if you want to start small, say as a sole proprietor, and work yourself up for a year or 2 years, assuming the risk there for a while, you can always move up to an LLC. And if you outgrow an LLC and you want that extra level of protection, or you want to bring some other people aboard as far as business partners or anything like that, you can certainly look at it maybe up into an S corporation or something like that. So you're not really stuck into one business model when you get started. So something to keep in mind. We get a lot of young people that ask that too, is like, well, it just blows their mind that the thought of them owning a corporation, it kind of scares them. And the corporation part of it is a scary term for some, but it's really, it just refers to the business model and the structure itself. It's nothing really to be afraid of.
The only thing with the LLC going to an S Corp, I believe there's a 5-year window. You can do a late election on that to go to a LLC S Corp. I think it's at
Yeah, and I
5
kind
year.
of did, and I did something weird because I actually went backwards.
You went backwards, yeah. And I had
Yes.
when I first started, I was just a single LLC, and then I went and did the late election on a S Corp. But I was it within that 5-year window, I believe is what it is.
Okay, so that's good to know. Because I can see, I do get the differences and advantages, but when I decided I'm never gonna make more than a certain income amount, and I'm never gonna be more than one person, it just didn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
To do, but yeah, that's a good notation.
Way to aim big.
Well,
That's right.
I always joke with people. I'm like, I can't wait to pay more taxes.
Absolutely.
sometimes less is more, right? I mean, that's the saying. Do we want to talk to the steps then? No.
Yeah, I
I
guess.
think that would be, I was gonna do it at the end, but I feel like it makes sense now.
Let's do it.
Okay. So starting in LLC, I don't know how it is in Australia but for all us United States people, an LLC is a federally recognized entity, but it is something you actually go through your state in order to make. But the gist of it is all the same from state to state as far as I know, but probably the website and maybe the forms you have to do are slightly different. But the first step is kind of obvious. You need a name. And you can't just pick any name. There's certain words that may be restricted that you're not allowed to use. And also you can't pick a name that's similar to another company. Even if it's in a corporation, you can't mimic. So like they have an example of Joe's Donuts. You can't be Joe's Donuts LLC and Joe's Donuts Inc. and be two separate entities. They won't allow that. So
Actually, I think in Wisconsin, it's limited by county. So believe it or not, you can have 2 Joe's Donuts, one in Clark County and one in Wood County.
okay.
There are certain regulations with the state on that, but they will allow you to do it as long as you're not in the same county. So it's kind of strange. I actually had this happen, but it wasn't with another surveying firm. So I have TrueMark Land Surveying, and I had about 2 years after I was in business, we were doing something online, and I noticed that I typed in TrueMark. Well, all of a sudden I had another, I won't say the name, but it had the name TrueMark in there. Now I haven't copyrighted the TrueMark name, but I have within our county. So within our county, that TrueMark name is a protected, I guess you could say, brand name. So 2 years later, it happened to be one of our clients started a business of their own. In fact, if I went outside, I could probably look and see his house right now. Started another company or his own business with the name TrueMark. And, I'm thinking now, if you were an S corporation or a C corporation, you would never allow anyone to get away with this. You would brand that name, you would brand that, the logo, and maybe if you had one, and you'd have that protected. In Little Clark County here, I don't know, with 30,000 residents or whatever it is that we have in our county, I'm not going to make a big deal out of that, at least not at this point. But so I guess just to go on with what you were talking with there, check with your, obviously your local state and county regulations. I know that here, like I said, it is allowed. You just can't have the same name within the same county. So I'll just throw in here too. People always ask me, how did you pick the name TrueMark? Because I thought on this, I worked for the same guy for 17 years and it drove me nuts. I couldn't wait to get out on my own. I was actually standing in a median on an intersection in a busy town, and cars were flying by me on both sides. And a semi pulled through, And I saw on there and it said TrueMark. So I looked at the truck to see where they were from, like North Dakota or Nebraska or something like that. I believe somewhere down south. And I thought, you know, I really like that name TrueMark, and it kind of fits with our motto and our story. So that's how I ended up coming up with it. But I made sure that it wasn't in the same county before. So go to your local register of deeds or your local courthouse there, and just the first thing, like Netty was saying, is just they will have a list of names, and you'll be able to find. And I don't know if you're covering this, but I know there's you can go online on your state website too and just see if a name that you're thinking of is already taken or not. So didn't mean to jump in on you.
Well, that's perfect. I wasn't very original with my name, but I never intended to advertise as a business, because from the start, I always knew that I would likely work with somebody or for another surveying firm providing services. So I just picked Harley Surveying, and surprisingly, there is no Harley Surveying in Wisconsin. And I don't know that there's any surveyors with the last name Harley, as cool of a name as it is.
Had to
So
throw that in
I
there.
have to throw that in there. But you do have the option in some states of reserving a name. So if you're like, oh, I want to go into business someday, and I really like this name and I don't want anyone to take it, you do have possibly the option of reserving the name and putting a hold on it so that you can start your LLC at a later date. The next step is kind of easy. If it's just you have to pick a registered agent. Most of the time it's you as the owner because you're the only one. And then you get to file, in Wisconsin at least, we get to file this dumb little form every year and pay $25 plus $1 convenience fee just to say, yeah, I'm still an LLC at this address and that's me. Yep, got it. Awesome. Take my $26. But that's fun stuff. Now, like the benefits of being an LLC over a corporation is you don't have to file so much organizational paperwork from the start. It can be pretty basic. I mean, basically you need this LLC operating agreement. It's just how you're going to run your LLC. You know, if it's just you, you're not really going to get too detailed into what the members do and whatever, because it's just you. Now, if you choose to be more than one member LLC, you might want to differentiate all that stuff. Eric and I chose not to be a multi-member LLC just because in Wisconsin, they view that as a partnership and it can get kind of messy for taxes. And just if you ever decide to go your separate ways, now you've got this integrated mess. And it just, my tax person said, don't do it.
10 years, you're still here.
I know, and I'm still here. I wasn't supposed to be here. Then each state will have its filing process. Wisconsin's is pretty easy. It's through the, what do they call themselves now? Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions. They changed their acronym the last couple of years. Each state has their own thing. If you Google the website, it should be pretty intuitive for the process you have to do. You pay your fee, you answer all the questions and provide all the information. So you actually need, you know, your name, a physical address of the LLC. I guess I don't remember saying how long it existed, but and then what your LLC purpose is. So in our case, you know, we provide land surveying services, but at first, actually, my purpose was to provide consulting services. I was not a licensed surveyor at the time I started my company.
And LLCs are becoming, I don't know what it is in other parts of the country. You guys can help fill us in there, but in Wisconsin, people are starting LLCs for anything you can think of. Whether it be their investment property or their lake home property, There's people here that have LLCs for their hunting property, or it could be a legitimate service type business. It's just the number of LLCs that we see here in Wisconsin is just exploding. And I guess, you know, why not? When you look at all the benefits of an LLC and the level of protection that you get, Jeanette talked a little bit about the organizational structure. I'll just jump in just for a little bit, because the one good thing about an LLC, and this is something that when I started my business, this is what I did. I did file articles of organization, and I did file articles of what my business model was. And I guess I did that just to make sure that, you know, if something did happen to me and the business was to continue on, that they had that model to follow. They knew all of the wishes. They knew exactly the structure of the business and how it was to be run if I wasn't to be a part of it anymore. So, and the same is held true with if it's recreational property or hunting land. A lot of these families are starting to form LLCs just so that they have, in fact, this is something that we have 260 acres here that, you know, we as land surveyors, you see it every day, the amount of bickering and fighting that are among family members, whether it's siblings or, you know, children of the owner of the property. We see that every day, and it's just an LLC also gives them the level of protection, or I guess not just protection, but a designation. So similar to a will, you can, in your LLC articles of organization, you can spell out certain terms of that organization as you want it to be, you know, to see fit. And I guess this kind of goes more in terms of, you know, a partnership type LLC or something like that. But we start to see a lot of them around here where the trusts are forming LLCs. So they're like double protecting themselves, not only with an irrevocable trust under the, you know, as an umbrella for the LLC that they have. So I don't know that you can overprotect yourself or over explain yourself, but that's just another thing to think about. If you're looking at forming an LLC, is you can have all of those terms spelled out, you know, within the articles of organization of your LLC. So something important to keep in mind, I think.
Yeah, and I guess something I didn't even think about bringing this up, but I'm glad you did, is, you know, a lot of times as surveyors, when clients call us, sometimes we're the first one and they don't know what they're doing or where they're going or how. They're just like, you know, oh, my dad passed away, or, you know, my mom's going into assisted living, like, help, like, what do we do? You know, you can educate them on these different ideas. I mean, you know, we're surveyors first. We're not, you know, you always give that disclaimer. But the thing is, sometimes you can point them in the right direction or give them ideas on how to solve their problem, because it's survey related. And I guess, you know, that's our goal with our business, is like, not to just, oh yeah, we'll do the survey for you and provide you no additional help or information. We want, if you missed a step before you contacted us, we want to take you back to the people that are going to take care of you. And then we're going to guide you to the next people that are going to keep you moving in the right direction. So that, because sometimes it's like you do a survey and they think everything's fixed, and then you look on the GIS a year later and it's like, oh, they never filed any deeds or anything to fix that. That's great. So that's something you can educate your clients about if you have those type of situations, because that is becoming popular, to protect land from going into probate and all that kind of drama. And then obviously, if you're an LLC, you file in the state that you're located in and the state you're doing business in. You can do business in multiple states, and you would have to follow through with registering, and then just be aware of all the tax rules associated with that. So that's another thing to note. Our life's pretty simple because we're in Wisconsin. We do business in Wisconsin, and we typically have mostly Wisconsin clients. So it's pretty straightforward there. Yeah, more stuff, otherwise I'll...
Good, unless we have some questions.
Can you dive into the structure of your business then, with both of you owning it, but also being one
Yes,
identity?
you're on cue, Nolan, because that's exactly what I was going to go into next, because I think this is why Adrian originally asked us to talk, was about this specific aspect. Because maybe you're a younger surveyor and you're not sure about going into business on your own, and but you would if you knew you had somebody to help you, but yet you don't want to be financially all tied up with their business. Or maybe they're like, I don't really want an employee, and I don't want to add you to my LLC. Like what are some options? You can kind of think outside the box here. So basically I prepared some information to discuss our relationship. And basically this is a conversation of being an independent contractor versus an employee. Because we are both individual LLCs, we file as sole proprietors. So one tax filing, but how does that work? So when Eric and I first had our conversations about working together, we were not sure at the time how long we were going to work together. Basically, I was not licensed yet. I wanted to be licensed. He was sick of working at his old company and wanted to be on his own. And so then he was like, I'm not turning around and hiring employees. That's what I hated about my last job, with some of my coworkers being awful. And so I'm like, he's like, so I'm not interested in teaching you anything. And I'm like, well, I'm not interested in learning anything from you anyway. I just need my hours.
She said that.
That's exactly how it went. So like I said, he never meant to have employees. And he's like, you can just work with me till you have your hours. This will give me a jump start with my business too. So this should work out fine. But a few months in, we're like, okay, we have to like get this like pay situation figured out, and what are we gonna do come tax time? Because we're working together too much. You can't just do cash under the table and all that stuff. And
Nobody does that here though.
nobody does that, right? Let's see. So thoughts of starting a boundaries. Oh, and so at the time, I wasn't even living in Neilsville. I was living down by Madison, east of Madison away. So I was like, I'll never move to Neilsville. And, maybe I'll want to start doing boundary surveys there. I was sick of working for a bigger company. I grew up in a family business my entire life. So working for another company for 8 years, that was enough. I'm like, I can't stand having a boss. That's never going to work for me long term. So like I brought up earlier, when I talked about it with my tax professional, they really said, yeah, don't be a multi-member LLC, because something goes wrong and like, how do you separate the assets? How do you, separate yourselves? You're going to have a big filing mess. And I know this has happened to one of my former bosses. Like, she originally started on her own with somebody, and then the relationship fell apart. And it leads to a lot of problems. So the more we discuss about the possibilities of our business relationship, the more we realize that just being two separate LLCs seem like the cleanest way to go, because we do not want to do the employee thing with all that employee paperwork. But how can we be two LLCs and work together the way we are, and be legit? So we said, well, I'll make Harley Surveying. I can be an independent contractor of TrueMark Surveying. And starting into business this way with this structure really paved the way for me to grow into my own business and to grow into myself as a professional, because I had him right there to mentor me. And TrueMark Surveying that's what we do business as. Obviously, nobody knows about Harley Surveying. I don't ever advertise it. I don't have it out there anywhere. So all the work, majority of the work and everything gets funneled through there.
Yeah, I guess it's important to remember too, though, that we do work together sort of as a partner. In fact, we operate almost as a partnership type LLC, but I'm not providing 100% of the work to Jeanette either, or Harley Surveying for that matter. So she does have clients of her own that she does. Again, check your individual state requirements, because in Wisconsin here, and I think she's probably going to get into this, there are very specific, there's a fine line between what the IRS and the government calls an employee versus a sole proprietor, or working under somebody. So you got to make sure that you qualify for all of those criteria. And that's very easy to do, is just establishing how you establish that business model.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna go into that
okay,
in super
so-
detail.
All right.
So,
Can I interrupt a question?
yes,
So when you start talking, you've got a mixed group, if you like. How do you handle the other things that are part of the business, like insurance, because professional liability insurance and stuff like that come into the
yes.
play?
So, it got a lot easier when we purchased our own building. We were able to have a liability policy that just all got lumped in with our business owner policy of the building. And I'm allowed to add him as a rider. So even though he's a separate LLC, because we have that subcontractor contractor relationship, we're allowed to have a joint business policy together.
Yeah, so her insurance company actually also treated us as like a joint venture. So even though we were operating as two separate LLCs, we were under one roof. We both have offices in the same physical building. So her insurance company was actually able to combine those insurance. There was an umbrella policy with the subcat, each of us under that. And it saved us thousands and thousands of dollars. I still can't believe the insurance company does it. So our E&O insurance, our property insurance, all of the liability insurance, all of that is taken care of, but it is in each business owner's respective name. So Harley Surveying has a policy, and TrueMark Surveying also has a policy, but it basically falls under one umbrella. So for us here in Wisconsin, that worked out fantastic. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm sure. Be more of the same.
Yeah, so I mean, it might get more complicated if you weren't operating your businesses in the same building. But I don't see why that wouldn't be a possibility. You could discuss that with your insurance provider. If you have a relationship like ours where you're consistently working together, it wouldn't be a bad option to explore, because they didn't charge a lot more, because they're like, well, you're doing the same type of business and you're typically doing it together, so that risk is a lot less than if you were both doing your own thing all the time.
There was one thing in the chat real quick. So Harley gets a 1099 for the services that you rent?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And vice versa, if
Yeah.
that happens. If I would happen to contract with her on one of her projects, she would also issue me a 1099. So it's 1099s back and forth. Yeah.
But typically, if I want to do it on my own, I don't include him at
Yeah, I
all.
get nothing.
Right. And then just
What
say,
do they say? What's hers is hers and what's yours is hers.
that's right.
Yeah.
And then how about just from an accounting standpoint, like a QuickBooks situation? So what do you guys do? That would be just like, for me, that would, if I'm paying any kind of vendor, it's called outside services or whatever, outside vendor services or whatever, right? Is that?
Yep. So
got
I'm a
that, right?
payee on his QuickBooks. Yep.
I actually have a category within my QuickBooks that's subcontractor. And the good thing about QuickBooks, I mean, I'm not biased to QuickBooks, it's just what we use. You were able to have multiple companies under one QuickBooks subscription. So we actually have, it's very easy for us within QuickBooks to work out those numbers back and forth. So.
Yep.
And then you just have a common fee schedule that you use for each company. So when Jeanette's working for you, she has a fee schedule and she gives you a scope estimating the cost of her services, and you work that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep, exactly. And that's
pretty easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works out good as long as, well, I might be a little bit better at estimating than her. I don't make as much money off of her projects, but
It's because she charges you too much.
yeah, I know.
Well, that's one thing surveyors are always afraid to do is charge what they're worth. It sounds like she's got that figured out.
Yeah, I think she finally has, yeah.
Well,
Maybe I should come to work with you, for you.
yeah, right. Well, and right now there should be no surveyors undercharging because it's
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, personally, in our little part of the world, we lost 7 surveyors in the last 4 years that were all individual owners, and it's just nuts. I mean, we could tell
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
that could be a whole
We could talk all night
mentoring
about
Monday.
that, because I think that's globally. I mean, you guys are, I'm sure you're feeling it too and seeing what's going on. So
Yep.
we just had our Wisconsin Annual Surveyors Institute. And so we had 1,000 relatively local surveyors come, and we always have the opportunity to sit and speak and share thoughts and ideas and things like that. And I think no one was there, and right?
No, he's from Indiana.
Oh, you're Indiana.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you should come here anyways. We
If-
have a really good time.
If I
Yeah,
was
we did.
invited, I would have hung out. She knows
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's not that far. What, like 7 hours maybe?
Well, I think I've met him somewhere. I'm trying to think.
I
Yeah,
just
you-
fly over.
Were you
You met him in DC.
in DC?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Got
yeah,
got you
so-
off track. Sorry. Go for it.
yeah, we're totally off track.
Go
but
for it, Netty.
It's okay. But yeah, this is exactly what we wanted. This is what we wanted to discuss our relationship, because this is the process we went through to determine the legitimacy of what we wanted to do. So basically our hope is that other people can listen to what we discussed here and decide if that business relationship would work with them in a similar situation with 2 people. Because I mean, that was it for me. It was just intimidating to go on your own, and I didn't want to be a sole proprietorship because there's just way too much risk. You're just kind of putting yourself completely out there. At least with an LLC, you are creating this separate entity, something that's viable. Oh, okay. I threw a funny in here. So a lot of people ask us if we're married, and our joke is that we get along too well to be married. But
True.
this is not the kind of relationship we're talking about tonight. Although it is common for family members or spouses to work together. And in that case, if they were 2 separate LLCs that wanted to work together, there definitely needs to be a lot of discussion up front just to make sure that the relationship is clear. So getting back on topic, can you just decide if you're an independent contractor or an employee? And the choice really isn't yours to make. It's not that black and white. I guess if you want to force that choice, then you need to follow the rules of what an independent contractor is. Otherwise, if you fall under being an employee, you put the person paying you in a bad situation potentially. Because there's a lot of factors that come into play with how you classify yourself. We're going to talk through each factor. These factors are directly off the IRS website. So I just copied and pasted them and then put my own interjections and explanation in there. Because, I mean, it ultimately comes down to taxation. The IRS wants their money. And if you're an employee, there's all the withholdings, your Social Security, you have to withhold your income tax, Medicare, and unemployment. So if they're not getting that from an employee, they're going to come after you. Whereas if you have an independent contractor, you're not responsible for their stuff. I get a 1099 from him. He doesn't have to worry about what my tax designation is. That's my own problem. He just says, this is what I paid you last year. And that's all he has to worry about. So let's dig into this. So who are you working with? What kind of worker are you? So an independent contractor, according to the IRS, is who are in independent trade, business, or profession in which they offer their services to the general public and are generally independent contractors. The general rule is if the payer has the right to control and direct only the result of the work and not what will be done and how it will be done. Whereas a common law employee is anyone who performs services for you if you can control what will be done and how it will be done. This is even so if you give the employee freedom of action. What matters is that you have the right to control the details of how the services are performed. So in order to make this determination, the IRS asks you to they break down these factors into 3 categories, which we're going to discuss. If you're currently in a business relationship with another self-employed entity or individual, examine the relationship that you have against these factors and the degree of control that the business has over the worker. So it's all about the level of control. And he knows he can't control me anyway. I will just do my own thing.
Yeah, employee is not an option.
That's not an option. So the first aspect is behavioral control. So if you have facts that fall under behavioral control, these facts show that if the business has the right to direct and control what work is accomplished and how the work is done through instructions, training, or other means. So when we're talking about behavior, we're referring to how detailed are you in your instructions to provide this service or produce a deliverable. So for example, if Eric hires me to draft a map of survey, like he has the right to set the expectations of the standards of that product. Like, you know, this map of survey has to be done to Wisconsin Administrative Code AE7, for example. He has the right to determine his product as a payer, but he cannot tell me how to go about producing that product. He's paying me for the product. He cannot tell me all the little nuances and steps. He can't tell me what software to use. Like those are the kind of examples about behavior. So if you're, I mean, and I guess this is kind of maybe a gray area at first when you're working with somebody, because maybe there is a certain look you want to a map or something. So maybe you would give direction to an independent contractor at first, but this shouldn't keep happening over time. If they're truly an independent contractor, they need to have the skills and provide this product to you without all this too much mentorship and direction.
Right.
I guess does that part kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, you're good, Netty.
All right. So so that one's kind of short. In financial control, these are facts that show if the business has the right to direct or control the financial and business aspects of the worker's job. So this includes the extent to which the worker has unreimbursed business expenses. So for example, our companies do not pay each other for normal business expenses incurred, like our PPE, our continuing education, our licensure, our membership fees. All those kind of things are each our own responsibility. He does not pay me back for those. It's my job to be licensed and able to provide services for him.
Going back to what you said earlier about being in control of the product, I can think back 20 years or so ago, we had a couple entities that showed up, that a guy and another guy with a truck and their own survey equipment. And they went around and they contracted with people to do surveying work. Well, none of them were licensed, you know, so it was on us. It was on us to hire them if we wanted, and it was on us if we decided that the product they were going to provide was what we needed. But they still would have been an employee situation. They wouldn't have been really, because they weren't licensed to provide the product that they were being asked to provide.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
So we hired them.
So
and they were
you're
employees.
Love it.
you're dealing with not only I guess, a legal matter there, but an ethical thing as well. And unfortunately, we have a lot of those here. They're everywhere. We have technicians that take the company vehicles home on the weekends and they're running around the county, you know, doing surveys for their friends, neighbors, and relatives, right? And I think that happens everywhere. So good point, though. That's
Yeah,
Do you have
'cause
that
if-
do you have that much moonlight up there?
well, I think it's dwindling. You know, the last few years have been really tough on a lot of these businesses to keep going, especially east and south of us here.
Yeah.
There's an extreme amount of competition. A lot of the bigger companies have, if they did survive, they've moved into, you know, a 1 or 2 person operation in the basement of their house or in the corner of their garage or something, just trying to hang on. So I think in the last few years, a lot of that has probably dwindled off just because there's just an absorbent amount of work. I mean,
right, you'd be foolish to do it for a 6-pack on the weekend, you know, with everything, you know. I mean, we actually get people that ask us that, though. This is a side funny. I mean, they're like, they call and they're like, well, what would you do it for on the side, like on the weekend? And we're like, we work for ourselves, so we don't work on the side or the weekend. Like, or if we work on the weekend, it's because
Get
we
paid for it, yeah.
are
Oh my
gonna pay
goodness.
for it, or
Yeah.
or we like you and we actually want to do that. Otherwise, no way. That's another benefit of going into business for yourself. I mean, you set your own hours. You know, for the purpose of this discussion, just because you have freedom of when you work doesn't necessarily make you an independent contractor, though. That was one fact. But yeah, if you don't have the qualifications to produce a product, it's pretty tough for you to say that you're an independent contractor then. So that was a good point. Thank you. So now again, in our business setup, obviously TrueMark is our advertising company. That's where most of the work gets funneled out of, and he has majority of the business expenses, but that's legitimate because he has a lot more income. You know, I'm only taking what I'm charging for my services, so I don't have near the business expenses. So I mean, it all makes sense. But if you would be paying your worker all his expenses and his tools and his PPE and stuff, you're gonna have a hard time saying that he's an independent contractor if you're giving him everything that he or she needs to do the job.
Did Joanne have a question?
Nope.
Oh,
No, I think her bird was talking in the background. I love it.
well, they're probably talking to our cats. So
Yeah, the cats like run like a herd of elephants. So, and then the next thing is the extent of the worker's investment in facilities or tools used to perform the services. And in this case, it's kind of backwards. So me as Harley Surveying, I own the building and I own the GPS equipment and the total station. So me in my own right have a significant investment in order to perform the surveying services that I'm providing to TrueMark. So if the worker doesn't have a significant investment in order to provide the services that they're providing to you, that's another factor that, you know, that's not looking good for the independent contractor argument. We each have our own computers and our own tools, and we do have a company vehicle, although we don't have it owned by TrueMark, but that's just because you get a much better break on mileage. So that, I guess that's a side note for small business owners, that you kind of got to weigh the pros and cons of whether your company owns the vehicle or if you take advantage of mileage reimbursement. And I'm sure that varies by state on the cost benefit ratio of that. So the extent that the worker makes his or her services available to the relevant market. So when I first talked to my tax professional, when I wanted to do this, he's like, well, all your income can come from one source. Because if you think about like a general contractor on a site, they might always hire the same painting crew, and there's nothing wrong with that, because they're doing their own thing, they're their own service, they're their own company. Just because there's a main source of income is one person, that doesn't mean employee. You know, you can still be an independent contractor. But would you be available to the relevant market? Would you be available to work for another firm and provide the same thing? Or are you available to the general public to provide the same service? You know, can you say that? It's more about your availability than whether you actually do it or not. So, and I do some work on my own, but probably 95% of my income is from TrueMark surveying. But there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't make you an employee. Then another factor is, how does the business pay the worker? I mean, if you pay the worker on a weekly, bi-weekly, something reoccurring basis for similar amounts, or in relationship to hours of work performed, that's kind of giving the employee vibe. You know, how do you pay them? Do they issue you an invoice and you pay it? You know, while Eric and I would love to do surveying for free, you know, we do need to get paid, and we do need to pay each other for the services that we provide to each other. So, you know, since I own the equipment, for example, like he actually pays me rent. He pays me rent for the part of the office building. So there is income actually coming from multiple things. So that kind of adds legitimacy to our working relationship. So that's something, if you were to enter a relationship kind of like ours, maybe one of you owns the equipment, maybe one of you owns the building. You can kind of explore those different things, but then, you know, pay each other for even if it's a wash, just to establish legitimacy for those things. And then the last part of the financial is the extent to which the worker can realize a profit or incur a loss. So the example I have is, so Eric as TrueMark might hire me as Harley Surveying to conduct measurements of a field survey. We're both licensed surveyors, so I'm licensed to do that. I would charge for the service performed, not for the hours I worked. And I might charge him a equipment rental fee. I have a risk involved because, you know, I have equipment that I purchased that I got to pay for on a monthly basis. And I told him a price for that work. So if it takes longer, I might have a loss. If it takes less, I have the opportunity to make a better profit. If there's a guaranteed amount for me, that's more like an employee, because I'm going to get compensated for my time no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another, that's probably a big one with the financial is, are you guaranteed to get paid for the hours you put in, or is it, no, you're going to get paid for the work you do, but, you know.
We have a pretty loose contract. It's nothing that, you know, that's the advantages of having Jeanette and I, on a personal note, have known each other over 15 years. We've only been working together now, I guess, you know, since 2012 or so. So, you know, we kind of know each other's personal situations outside of the work environment. We know our goals and we know that. So you can tailor your contract to kind of work best for both of your situations. It's one of the beautiful things about an LLC. So, you know, the partnership thing, I mean, that was something that we also seriously considered, but I was in a similar situation with another firm in that circumstance, and there were more family members, and I was kind of the outsider, and they say blood is thicker than water. Well, it's true. I was the odd man out. So, you know, if you just look at these as, you got to take your own personal situation there. And like I said, we talked to a lot of young people who are scared about venturing out into their own and starting their own company. And this is, for us, it was the best way to merge and just be able to work together without each of us having 100% of that risk. We always had kind of each other to fall back on. So other comments there we got to
Yeah,
respond to?
I'm just gonna look at the comments, but
Yeah, no, there's some good stuff in there. So one of the, going back to some of the stuff you talked about, right? The old IRS thing is walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's a duck, right? I mean, that's how you got to classify your employee situation, right? If you tell them what time to report and you tell them, what duties to do and certain things like that, obviously he's more of an employee than he is a independent contractor. So, and then a little bit more, we have somebody here in Nevada who he has an LLC for his boundary work. He has an LLC for his construction work. He has an LLC that owns his equipment.
yes, yep.
So, there's situations where you can create those barriers. I'm sure you get any kind of a lawsuit, it's gonna, any attorney's gonna kind of pick that stuff apart and try to find it. But I mean, he's created those layers of protection to, keep the equipment in one side where each company pays that equipment, that business rent for their equipment and stuff. So yeah, you can create definitely lots of layers of protection for sure.
Yeah, excellent point. Yep.
Yeah, because that's a good aspect of the way we do, because since I own the office building and the equipment, but we do business as TrueMark Surveying. So who are people going to sue? TrueMark Surveying, and at least I'm separate and our equipment's separate. So that's a very good point. But you could even have a whole separate LLC just for that and rent to, because each one is an entity and you can rent to yourselves. Now, if they're all single member tied to you, you might still all do taxes on one form. So it might not make a difference money wise. It might be a wash here and there, but it does provide that extra layer of protection, because maybe they won't, they're like, well, maybe they'll respect that. Okay, you can sue me as like TrueMark Surveying, but you can't sue me as GPS Equipment LLC.
Right. Yeah, there's less liabilities on the book to take, right? If there's some kind of big stuff. So, Sean had a comment in there. Is it common to hire a land surveyor consultant to help a new business owner? I think that's, a lot of what we're doing here, Sean, right? Just mentoring and any kind of mentoring through that. And what was another one? Cut off the bottom. If so, what does that arrangement look like? I think it's more so just reaching out to even reaching out to me, Sean, or anybody, and we can kind of get local people in contact.
Because I mean, that's exactly why Eric hired me, was to help me get started. We never intended for this to be as long of a term relationship as it was. So you could just actually help somebody jumpstart in their business. Yeah,
and I've done that. I've hired another young LLC that just started, and he was doing, basically contract drafting for us. So another situation. Will has a good question just between the two of you. So do each, if you have a project, do you each create your own project contracts? And then, like you say, invoicing back and forth? How does the accounting side and the project accounting?
There's two sides to that. I'll let you go ahead, but essentially I have my own contracts. If I have Harley Surveying as a subcontractor for that particular project, that is listed as a subcontractor, and so those specific tasks will, and usually that's for liability purposes. Within the contract, you define the scope and the terms of your liability and your insurance and that sort of thing if it's requested. Right. So all of that would be individually spelled out. So I guess you can talk to, on your side.
Yeah, because I mean, initially the first couple of years, we actually did list a lot of the individual projects as separate invoices, and we decided that was really cumbersome. So we have more a blanket agreement for like a fee structure for different type of services. There's just different amounts, and so then it's a lot easier then. And then I guess when I want to get paid, I'm just like, hey, you haven't wrote me a check in a while. Like, where are we at? Like, but because that's the thing too, is like, if you're paying somebody on a regular basis, then it's kind of gets the employee vibe. Now, if you're paying, as requested or invoice, so I think with the individual project contract question, if it's a large project, yes, we will do it separately. But if it's like these little small field surveys that we do, there, we just have a set fee structure, because a lot of them are so similar for cost. So we forgo those for the smaller projects, but something more formal, yeah.
I'm wondering, yeah, I don't know if you want to chime in or not, Will, but I wonder, so creating in Wisconsin, do you guys have a written contract rule in your state statutes? Are you required to have a written contract before you can perform work, or no? Do you guys know that, Netty or Eric? Do you
No.
guys- Yeah. Okay, so like here in Nevada, we have to have a written contract before we can start work. And so I wonder, like, part of that, maybe that lawsuit thing, maybe where Will's going with is if you don't have contracts in place, or maybe you've created a master service agreement between the two of you, maybe that's another step
Yeah,
between the two of you.
and-
But I would want to say you probably either create that master service agreement or you have written contracts for each project. You know, when it gets time to somebody to sue TrueMark, you're going to want to have those things in place, right? And so,
Right, and that's
I
kind
was
of.
more, I was more wondering whether it was getting down to a purchase order type process. Yeah.
and that's another way to kind of clean it up too. I just,
Yes,
if you get into that lawsuit issue, you're going to want to have your ducks in a row when it comes to paperwork. And so that's what I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
what everybody wants to ask there.
yeah, because in that idea of a purchase order, because so I've done contract work for the DOT, and I basically, it was a blanket contract to perform these map of surveys of lands that got messed up because the highway came through and now they're landlocked and they need to sell them off. So I was like on a at-call basis. It is a blanket agreement, and then I provide my fee, and then it's a purchase order, so I get paid like a vendor. So that's and so when I was doing that, I'm like, that's how we should do it. And that's when we switched to that mentality that it's like, instead of just, making all these individual contracts, it's more like a purchase order relationship with this master contract.
Perfect.
So that's a really good way to say it.
Yep. No, that's good. So two things, Sean, like he says, everybody's a good surveyor, but that's been the surveyor's downfall. Everybody's a great surveyor, but nobody's a good businessman. So,
and then Will's like, do you have an exit strategy?
Yeah.
And I guess, yes. And that's why we would encourage people to set it up this way, because anytime we are not connected in any way as our LLCs. I can walk out the door, he can walk out the door. I mean, obviously I have a physical business location, and we have different things that we own that are tied to our businesses. And so if we decided not to work together, we might have to combat for that service that the other person provide, but we can still function separately. And we do. There's some jobs where he solely does, and there's some jobs that I solely do. So at any time, if I had to move for some reason or whatever happened, we could each function as our own business. So that's another good question to ask, even at the beginning. I think that's Stephen Covey's thing, you don't consider, you need the end in mind when you start.
Begin with the end in mind. Right?
So it's like, because otherwise you're going to run into troubled waters when you do get to that situation. But if you have that conversation up front with the person you want to go into business with, then it's clear expectations when that relationship isn't working out for one way or another, or if a different opportunity came in and they want to switch focuses in life.
Nice.
So
Go ahead.
Go for it, George.
Well, to go along with what Sean said, and I agree with him wholeheartedly with my 50-some years of experience in the business. There's lots of good surveyors, not many good surveyors that are good businessmen. That works for engineers too. And unfortunately, we get wrapped up with them as well, and we end up dealing with what they promise for us sometimes. This is just great information, and I think anybody young in the profession or anybody who's thinking about going out on their own ought to take advantage of this discussion. Just just to make them think about what the parameters are and what the different options they have are, because you can go in a lot of different directions, and unfortunately there's probably more of them that are down than up if you're not paying attention to what's going on.
Right.
And there's plenty of us, like I said before, there's plenty of us that are nonprofit surveyors. Not because that's the business model we chose.
Right.
That's the business operation we chose. If that makes sense, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
No, it does. And, unfortunately, like, we're on the up and up. So any young surveyor, I mean, it's a lot less risk than it was, when I got into surveying in 2006 and everything started crashing in 2008. It was like, wow, this is awesome. It was a lot scarier to think then, maybe going out on your own, but now, and then unfortunately, I feel like there was a stigma with some older surveyors. I'm not trying to paint a bad picture, but it's just some that I know, they have this idea that they don't want to train their competition, So instead of mentoring somebody and replacing themselves, they just die or retire. And now, like, we're left with a chaotic situation. We don't have anybody replacing them. And, people are like, why is it so hard to get a hold of a surveyor? It's like, because there is none. Like and then we're not a company, we try to, it's like, yeah, we're a company, but there's only 2 of us and we do everything and all the administrative work to run a business. So there's only so much time we have to, field phone calls. So if more older surveyors would, not feel like you're training your competition, but instead training your protege, we'd be in a lot better shape. And I know nobody here feels that way, otherwise you wouldn't.
No. That's not right. Jeanette, I got started in surveying in 1966. You look pretty young to me. But I will say this, many people took the time to share their knowledge with me along the path of my career. And I felt for the last 20, 25 years, it's my obligation to give as much of that information back as I can. Unfortunately, there's not very many people to give it to. There's, that's the big problem right now.
Yeah.
What's the average age of a surveyor in the United States now? It's in the 60s, I think, isn't it, Trent? I'm finally above average. I'm 74.
Love it. Now,
I wanted to
go for it.
piggyback off of Carl's question that's in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to ask that too.
So, kind of like in Trent's boat, my accountant told me not to hire someone as long as I could, and then I had someone we both know help draft for me for a while. When you guys, I guess I don't know if it's more Netty's or Eric's, but when you go to bid a project, do you account for Netty being in that number, or do you say you have your field number and Netty has her field number, and it's kind of come down to profit and loss side? What are you coming up with those numbers per se? Like, do you
I think
picture yourself as a 1-man or a 2-man crew, and without getting into too much details?
Yeah, and I see that the question there, if we help each other on the fieldwork side of things, or whether it's drafting or whatever, and that. So if I know that she's going to be involved in a specific project, I think, Jeanette, you mentioned that we kind of have that, we have that blanket agreement as to what we know that we charge each other for a specific product or specific service. So like if it's mapping, for example, I don't pay her an hourly wage to sit and draft a map. We have a negotiated price on what is a map of survey worth. A 1-lot certified survey map, it might be worth this, because we've been doing this long enough now. We know how long it takes to draft that map, so we've, rather than do it on an hourly basis, pretty much everything kind of has an agreed upon cost for whatever that particular product is. I guess
I'm assuming that if it's mostly coming from TrueMark, then you have like either a marked up cost or, this is what
Right.
you're expecting.
Oh, yeah.
Even though
Yeah,
it's
we're definitely
two
gonna make
amounts
sure.
of work, you're probably getting a little bit or vice versa.
Yeah, I'm kind of on a worst case scenario basis. In my mind, I always figure worst case scenario. And now you can take worst case scenario, multiply it by 3, and they're still going to pay that. So it works out really well. But
Yeah,
uh,
it's getting nuts around here. But the Carl's question, because so I guess we don't like help each other doing field work. Like we have specific roles that we do. So there's specific pieces. Like if you broke a survey down into all the little pieces that you do. So I am always, I guess what you call the equipment operator. Like,
Mhm.
well, it's mine and I don't want him to touch it, I guess. Well, sometimes I let you hold her. I mean, but it's just um so in that regards, and then most of the time he's just PRing with the client, so I guess we have our roles and our different things we do. And so, but there's jobs where I don't go and do the field work at all. So then obviously he gets all the benefit from doing it himself, or vice versa. If I go to do it myself, it's just each job is, but it's not like we don't nitpick. It's not super complicated because like Eric said, I mean, we now, especially with how people are just paying for surveys, I mean, we have fees for certain, not that surveying is a fee-based business, because it's not. I wholly agree with that argument, because there's some jobs that are special and you look at them and you're like, you look at the research and they're unique and they need more time and love, to figure them out properly. But there's some that are just these cookie cutter land divisions, and all the section corners are in and they're all on roads. This is really easy. I mean, we can spit out that number really fast and I know what I'm going to get paid out of that survey. So if you do field work together, you need your specific roles, or maybe you say the field work is worth this much of the overall cost, and you split that in half because you did it together. That's one way to go about it. But those are the kind of things that you have in your master agreement, for example, so that it's defined, if you do this, this is what you get paid, kind of thing.
And I think setting those fees too, you can kind of, I think maybe where Nolan was going with that, if you're hiring some drafting services, right? And you're like, I'll pay you $500 to do a record of survey. And if it takes you an hour and a half, or it takes you 10 and a half hours, that's your risk reward at that point. So I think it's more of a kind of a lump sum situation that might get you away from that employee feel to it, right? I guess that's probably the best way to describe that.
Right.
Mhm.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
I think that's perfect, right? When you said, if you split it, that's something that's just agreed upon in that master
Exactly.
agreement. Because
Yeah.
like when I was having someone draft for me, I would already have a lump sum price. And if this guy took longer or shorter, I'm paying him no matter what, because he's a contractor and I'm
Right.
either going to make a profit or a loss, but I'm either going to fall behind and not get more jobs and, yada, yada. But with the field, if you're splitting it in half, that's just an agreed upon thing. So
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
Yep.
Right. But you can't, like, you couldn't base it like on hours, for example, or something like that. You need to, that's the biggest thing, is if you really want to make the independent contractor argument, just whatever you charge, it can't be based on hours. It's got to be based on, this is what it costs, and you can realize that profit or loss, regardless
Right, because
of how well you
if it's
perform.
$500 to do the field work and you're both out there, it's both gonna be $250 either way, whether you make
Right.
more or less. On it.
Unless he's allowed to, like you said, if he's allowed to mark up my services, so maybe it's 40-60 because he's the one incurring most of the liability or the work. Maybe that's what it looks like. And that's more what we kind of have, is like a percentage based on the overall cost of the survey and the different pieces. So that's kind of our agreement.
Mhm.
But yeah, those are all good examples.
This
of
is
possibilities.
kind of outside of what you're saying, but I think the biggest mistake we make as surveyors is relying on hours.
Yeah.
We charge jobs based on the hours we spend to do the job, and we don't add anything to our expertise and our liability. And that's where a lot of us take a bath. A lot of us have weekends off and not have anything to do but watch football and drink beer or whatever else we want to do on the weekend. But no, we're basing jobs on hours that we spend on the job and whether we get paid for them or not. And it's silly because we provide a service, for crying out loud, and it's our expertise that we're providing. And we know more about what we're doing than anybody else, the lawyers, the judges, the realtors, the title companies. I mean, we're the ones that are responsible for providing this product, and doggone it, we ought to get paid for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially in the market right now, if you've made that mistake in the past, now is your time to fix it. You know,
Right.
you
Yeah,
need
for
to
sure.
be paid what you're worth.
Yeah.
And it's not based on the hours you put in. And I'll make a funny here because like Eric knows how much I love research. He could not afford to pay me by the hour to do research because sometimes I get a little too into it.
She'll be there all day sometimes.
I'll just park my butt at the courthouse and open the books and yeah. So I some jobs we lose at just because, but I'm enjoying my job and I'm enjoying looking into this. So, but like I said, you're exactly right in that. Like right now, please charge what you're worth. Do a favor for the profession
There you go.
because we've had enough surveyors. There's plenty of them in Wisconsin. I'm sure there's plenty elsewhere that it's just like, dude, you're leaving 50% on the table, easy. Don't do that to yourself and don't do that to us. And then if we don't have more questions, the third part is the relationship of the parties. So, and this, we kind of touched on a lot of this stuff just in our conversation, but so like a written contract or oral agreement describing the relationships the party intended to create. So the IRS actually recognizes oral agreements and some things that Eric and I do, we've just discussed and we know, and that's how it is. But some things need to be written down depending on the type of project we do, like especially if we're doing something very formal like an altar or something, all that stuff needs to be spelled out if we're going to work together on it. Like, so, and some things like, you know, so you need to have that agreement in place. I'd recommend it in writing unless you have a really good relationship with the other person, but even the best relationships could go bad. I guess we're a little old fashioned up here. We do a lot of surveys. People they don't care about signing a contract or anything. They just pay you up front. They take your word for it, kind of thing. But if you were to enter a business relationship and you want to make it absolutely clear that this person is an independent contractor, have that agreement in place and define that what your intentions are. You know, just like we all know that when we look at a deed that doesn't give us a lot of information and we wish there was something there, a call or something, so we knew what they meant, you know, set yourself up in a way to protect both parties.
And then, as I mentioned on that earlier too, right? Some state boards may have contract requirements in place. So even though IRS may take an oral one, or you know, some court systems may take orals, but some state boards, you know, you could lose your license for not having a contract in place. So just you know, back to that, the same disclaimer, right? Check with your state boards and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. If your state requires a written contract for you to perform a service for a client, then you definitely need a written agreement between any independent contractors that would be working for you. Definitely.
Exactly.
Do not, it's not worth it.
Right.
You had a question there if we contract our construction work. The answer to that now is no. We take almost zero construction as far as like construction staking and that sort of thing. We both had our place in the past with that. We found our little niche here. I would say close to 90% of our work is strictly boundary type work here. Right now we're in the lull. There's not a whole lot of subdivisions going on. We get a handful of altas here and there, but you know, we've narrowed down, this is another thing that's off topic, but we tell our young people, find something that you love to do and then narrow it down. The surveying profession is so broad and so diverse that you can go here, there, everywhere. But once you find that thing that you love to do, become an expert on it, focus on it, and just do that. And the money will follow if you're a good business person.
Yeah.
But so we don't, if your question is about construction type staking, we don't do any of that at all right now, I know.
And then I guess like bid work, you know, I don't know how it is like in Hawaii, but like for example, like the DOT, you might provide a bid item for like X number of dollars per replacing a section corner on a state highway project. So that would be a time and materials thing, because you're creating a fee and then you're getting paid. So I guess we don't do that kind of work. But if you did that kind of work together with an independent contractor, it would need to be clear what the roles are, and who's doing what and responsible for what. And thank you, George, for your comment.
You know, a lot of our municipalities around here have what are called RFPs, so there are requests for proposals. If the municipalities are looking to hire a private contractor or a private surveyor to do certain services. So a lot of those, we touch zero, and simply it's just because of, and I guess this kind of goes to what George was saying, is we know what we're worth, and we know what we're willing to do for a certain amount of money. And not only that, some of these projects take an exorbitant amount of time. I mean, we are honestly saying no to more work right now than what we can say yes to. And that's just because there's not enough time to do it all, or we're booking into summer if they're willing to wait. So I guess the point I was trying to make is kind of alluding to this RFP, the municipalities that contract this work out. These guys, the competition, we started our earlier conversation about, there's some competition left lingering in the east part of the state, maybe the south part of the state. These guys will come up here and they will work for a fifth to a sixth of what we would normally charge to perform those services. So we've done enough of those estimates. We put enough of them in to see, and then they give you a list of the 10 people that put bids in, and you look at it and you say, I don't know how they can afford the gas to get to the project site for what they were willing to contract that for. So, but.
Sean gave a good answer. Because I actually, one of my former, well, yes, I graduated from NWTC with her, and she started her own LLC, and she went after bid work for DOT, and she wanted to hire me as a subcontract because she didn't do the surveying route, so she knew I was a licensed surveyor. So yeah, she would have subcontracted me to do the section corner replacement for that job if we got the project. So there's an example of an LLC hiring another LLC to do a specific task under a larger project. And George.
Yeah, if you're referring to George, if he's referring to riparian issues, this is something in Wisconsin that is just literally being exploded. So if you want to come, if you're licensed in Wisconsin or want to be, come on over, because we have a lot of the big city people, especially during COVID, who, you know, they just said, we're done with this big city stuff. We're going to move to rural America, and we're going to turn our lake house into our full-time residence. We're going to retire there, or we're going to work from home. And so we've got just this explosion of riparian, you know, projects and problems and everything that are coming up right now. So anybody that has experience in that, you know, of course, I guess in Wisconsin, fortunately, we have the gal that's the head of our the state plating office in Madison.
Yeah, a lot of you might know her, Renee Powers. She is an amazing individual, and I know eventually there'll be a day where she won't be there.
Yeah.
And so that's what sucks about being younger, I think, because she's an amazing mentor. But
off topic there again.
We are getting off topic, way off topic. Riparian rights could be a whole separate topic. So something I had under contracts as well is like, you know, what kind of services or products are they providing to you? You know, we kind of talked about this, you know, do you invoice each item, or create some kind of master contract with some sort of invoicing system within that. You know, that's something you definitely need to check with your state on what you can and can't do. But come up with something because it protects everybody. So one thing that's kind of obvious, you would think, but it is listed as a factor, whether the business provides the worker with employee type benefits such as insurance, a pension plan, vacation pay, or sick pay. I mean, obviously, if you pay any or all of these benefits, not looking like an independent contractor, it was brought up, yeah, we each have our own, we have an insurance policy together, but we are each listed separately. So we're each responsible and have our own policy under there. The permanency of the relationship. So while many employees are at will and they could technically leave at any time, there is this idea when you hire somebody, they're going to stay, you know, until like something doesn't work out. You know, there's this idea that it's going to continue indefinitely. Whereas a independent contractor, you offer them a job, they can say, no, I'm not doing that one, or I don't have time for that one. Or, I mean, obviously our relationship has turned into a long-term thing, but yeah, like was mentioned, at any time I could say no to doing a job. There are some jobs where I look at them like, you can take that one if you want, but I will not help you with it. So, I mean, I guess there's those, and I mean, it happens vice versa too. He yells at me, don't get suckered into that one. You know, you want to figure that one out, but that one's a mess, you know? So, I guess it goes both ways. So I'm not going to pick on him entirely.
It's okay.
And then the extent to which services performed by the worker are a key aspect of the regular business of the company. So this is important too, and we touched on this. You know, can the payer and independent contractor exist separate from each other? Are they too integrated that the payer could not function as a business without their services, because that is the primary function of the business? So, you know, while we do a lot of the same things, you know, we are separate in ourselves and we could function independently of ourselves. We don't need each other to do our services. I mean, we do have it so integrated that most people don't know we're two separate businesses because it's really not important. You know, they pay TrueMark and TrueMark pays me. So they don't need to know that. But if it was to the point where if I decided not to work for TrueMark and then he couldn't do his business without me, that's an employee, because you can't function on your own as a business. You're not a legitimate business if you can't function on your own. So that's a thing to consider. And then lastly, like, what are the responsibilities of the worker? This is a pretty big one. Are the responsibilities of worker the same as that of the payer, that you can't tell the difference? Are they so similar that it's, you know, is it too blurry? Is the payer dictating what the responsibilities of the worker are? I mean, we joke a lot, like people, our clients, we try to entertain as well as provide them a survey. But in all seriousness, you know, Eric can't tell me what my responsibilities are. He hires me to do a product or provide a service or rent equipment from me or whatever. So that's a big thing. I think the last part is even the most telling of whether you have an independent contractor or an employee relationship, is what that relationship, how it actually functions, is basically the last category.
Maybe that's a good way to think of it is yes, we are providing a service, but as subcontractors in the relationship that we have, I'm ultimately paying her for a product. I might be paying her for GPS coordinates on a series of property corners or something like that. on a topo project. Maybe I am paying for her to provide with me a layer of points with certain elevations or something like that. So I guess if you kind of think of it in your mind, in an LLC type relationship like that, you're not paying that person to go out and work for you. You're paying them to gather a certain piece of evidence or a certain bit of information, or even if it's research, because she loves to do that. I know that in the end, I'm going to get a good product. I'm going to get a packet of information that I can use to perform my service. So if you kind of mentally separate the two and think of it like that way, I think that kind of helps.
But I think, with responsibilities, you can, like was brought up earlier, you can set requirements. Like, obviously, if this independent contractor doesn't meet the requirements to complete the task, I mean, you can ask them to either get those skills or qualifications in order to do that work for you. That is something you can dictate, because in order to produce the product that you want, they have to have those qualifications. So you can put requirements on them. That's not creating, responsibilities. And then, and we can certainly come back to anything that we discussed at any time, but I want to make sure to get this out there. You don't know what you don't know. So if we talk through all this, and then you're entering this kind of relationship, and you're still like, you look at all these factors and you're still not sure, because even the IRS doesn't say, oh, if you meet 6 out of the however many, then there's no exact science, there's no magic formula for determining which factors make it one way or the other. And they said even in different types of businesses, other factors are more important than others. The key of it all is to consider the relationship as a whole, all the factors, the extent of control that the payer has over the worker. But if you still don't feel comfortable after all this, the IRS will determine it for you. There's a form SS8. It can be filed by either the business or the worker, and may take up to 6 months. I don't know when the last time they updated their website is. Maybe it'll take 2 years right now. I have no idea. But they said that they will determine it for you. And once that determination is made, then you will know who you are hiring and what you are dealing with. But once you do that, obviously, then they know. So it would be difficult then to try to change your relationship if it's not classified the way that you intended it to be classified. But you want to be sure, because there are consequences if you misclassify a worker. You can't, I kind of think back to when I first got hired as a intern, and they issue you a 1099 as a temp employee. I don't know all the rules with that stuff, but then it's like, they can't, it's a, let's see, so, you're going to get in the most trouble basically is if you treat them as an independent contractor, but they're clearly an employee, and you were negligent. You're just like, no, I want to treat them as an independent contractor, because then all I have to do is ask them for a W-9 and issue a 1099, and then I don't have to deal with it. So it's not like, you can't just do that. You need to have a reasonable basis for why you're classifying them as an independent contractor. Now, if you made an honest mistake, there is a process and provisions to reclassify somebody, and some forgiveness for the tax withholdings to make everything right. So if you going into this honestly and you made a mistake, the IRS allows you to fix it and not fully penalize you for it. Now, if you are working with an independent contractor, like I said, you have to ask for a W-9. So this gives them their current name and their taxpayer identification number. Now, if they're an LLC, they might have a TIN, or they might have a EIN, an employer identification number. It just depends on if they choose to get one, if they're sole proprietorship, or like I started out as S Corp, so I was forced to have one. So, and that's how I still file my taxes for my business. So like was mentioned, I get paid with a 1099. And he just reports how much he paid me for services, and we do a separate one for rent and a separate one for the equipment.
Mhm. So I see Jen had a question there, a comment, I guess. So are you referring to the SS8 form, Jen? Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I guess that's kind of what we're hoping to avoid here, or to maybe just give you a little bit of an education beforehand. Unfortunately, it sounds like you're doing this on the back end, or I'm not sure what the requirement was for you to file the SS8 there, but yeah, unfortunately, a lot of times dealing with the IRS, you're very fortunate that it's taken 6 months. I'm currently working on a situation that's almost the third year with the IRS, and they're not very speedy, and they're continuing to compound that interest as it goes. So
Yeah, because it can create a headache for you if you're I mean, it's a headache for both people, but yeah, I can see how it caused a lot of problems for you, Jen, to be misclassified, because if you're intending on being an independent contractor and at 1099, and then all of a sudden, no, you were an employee and you were supposed to have all that withholdings and stuff come tax time,
Mhm.
you got a huge mess.
Mhm.
But they do allow provisions to fix it if it was an honest mistake. If not, then that employer could definitely be
Mhm.
in big
And,
trouble.
and I guess we mentioned that we do kind of have this blanket agreement, but with each project, we do have an itemized list of who did what on that specific project. So if it ever would come up, if we were ever audited, or if the IRS would say, hey, we want to, review this, this working relationship that you guys have, you have that. I mean, sometimes it might be 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years down the road. If you haven't had a physical record, if you haven't written that down, you're not going to remember. I don't remember what I did last week, much less 5 years ago. So just always document everything if this is a route that you're looking at going in. I mean, this might be somewhat of a unique situation, although there are a few that had a similar situation. So just be aware upfront of those requirements, especially at the federal level, and then document everything that you do in case you do ever have to defend yourself. So not sure what happened in that specific situation,
But like Jen brought up is a good thing. So if you're in the situation of wishing to be an independent contractor and you're looking at all these factors and you're not sure, it's better to file that form and find out instead of having to deal with it a year later.
right.
Yep, exactly. Because employment taxes, as you know, I mean, this is why people want to be an independent contractor, because I have to just pay my self-employment tax. I pay my 15%. Whereas if you're an employee, there's all sorts of other taxes, and some of the employer is responsible for. Well, if you're a worker that got, they should be liable for some, but I can see how that could be a problem trying to get that money from them, especially if you're not in a working relationship with them now, if it was just a temporary situation. Yeah. So that's
Crazy.
definitely not a fun
I
situation.
guess that
to
would
be
be
in.
our back end disclaimer, is if you're unsure, just check with the IRS and see,
There you
because
go.
most cases it's better to know upfront and just deal with it. Or maybe it is something that you can modify slightly to make sure that you are compliant with the rules. Because yeah, the worst thing that you could have happen would be for them to come back on you, you'd be misclassified, and now you owe a bunch of money to the IRS that you don't know where it's going to come from. So I guess that would be my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I guess if anybody in the future, is listening to this later on and wants to reach out to us about, hey, I want to try this. What do I, because we can talk more details about what things I would recommend you to definitely do to make sure you're making it clear that you are that independent contractor. Because like I said, when we started out, there's some things that were probably a little more gray than as we evolved in our relationship and made sure that it's very clear now what our roles are and our ownership of different things. So it's a lot more black and white than it used to be. And the IRS actually does a lot better job now of explaining all these factors. I feel like when we first started, there wasn't this detailed of an explanation.
Yeah, definitely much better. Just go to irs.gov and just search under the business. They've organized it very, very nicely. A lot of, we did a quick review just to make sure.
Yeah, and I can provide all my notes and comments for people to look at too.
Yeah, I do a Dropbox folder, so you'll send me
Yeah.
whatever you want to send me, and then it goes in the Dropbox folder for that, like this particular week or whatever. So I'll
Perfect.
I'll
Cool.
throw those in there, and then obviously anybody can reach out to you or myself, and we can get you in contact with them. But Eric or Netty with TrueMark Land Surveying out of Wisconsin, do that in a Google search. I'm sure you'll find them. Otherwise, you can obviously shoot me an email as well. But that was cool. I love it. You guys got more, or was that it?
Well,
Kind of-
I mean,
You
that's
got more
kind of
down?
it, besides like the boring IRS aspects of an LLC. I mean, if there's somebody that wants to know anything, we can certainly talk about that stuff, but it's
Yeah.
also, easy to look at. We chose, like we said, to be single member LLCs, keep it super simple. There is some advantages to being an S corp, but that's more something you need to talk with your tax person about, because I know I decided for me that wasn't a way to go as one person.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. Carl, you turned your camera back on. You got anything to chime in there? Nothing? All right, no worries. I love it.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you,
Yeah,
Pat.
yeah, this
Thank
is,
you,
and like, we've talked about this for 60 plus weeks right now. It's this is the informative stuff that young business owners need, and we need this kind of stuff. So I appreciate you guys kind of putting the time together and putting the presentation together. It's cool. And then we can figure out, Nick, I figured out how to make an S corp. Happy to discuss offline. Okay. Yeah, there you go, Nick.
There
Cool.
you go.
Yeah. I'll throw, I can throw your follow-up stuff in the follow-up email as well, Nick, if people want to reach out to any one of you guys. But I'll make sure
Thank you.
I do all that follow-up stuff. So awesome. I appreciate the time, and then shoot me your notes, and then I'll throw them in the Dropbox. So awesome.
right.
guys.
All right.
All right,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
See ya.
you. Have a good night.
You as well.